Okay, now we're going to get into the character types here. First of all, we're going to start with an adversary. Adversary is the primary opposition for the hero, right? And it's one person. Appears unbeatable for, a good hunk of the movie, usually throughout Act 2. They can wear a mask of friendship. They can be a wolf in sheep's clothing for a while, and then that comes off and they are revealed who they truly are. But they have not changed categories. They were simply disguised for a while. Do you remember The Fugitive? Again, this goes back a few decades. But it was Harrison Ford in his heyday when he was, an A-list movie star. And he is Richard Kimball on the run. He has been convicted and condemned to die for his wife's murder, which of course is tearing him apart because he really loved her a lot. But he has a friend that he had when he was still a doctor and respected and all that. He has a friend, and when he escapes and goes back home to try to find, the one-armed man and all that who they thought was the real killer, this is his friend who helps him out a little, slips him, whatever cash he's got in his pocket. You can't give him a cash, he can't go to a bank. He needs help. And this character, this other doctor, helps Kimball and speaks well of him and so forth. But what we find out at the end of Act 2 is the helpful friend doctor, that's the adversary who set him up. He's it. He's the bad guy. And then in Act 3, it's all about the resolution between the two of them. Fight to the death kind of thing. So they can wear a mask of friendship, but that is not the case. They are not always a bad person. You know that, and I'm sure you've seen and can think of a whole bunch of adversary characters. They're not bad people. They just happen to, because of circumstance or the nature of the story, they come into opposition with your hero. And that can work extremely well sometimes. And remember, of course, the adversary must be one person, not an idea, not a group. It has to be one person or a personification of one person. By that I mean Jaws or one of those. The shark is the adversary. There's another guy who's messing things. That's an independent troublemaker, and that's the mayor of the town. But it's the shark who is the direct adversary. But it's not just a shark. It's a super shark. It is the smartest, most devious, most bold and vicious, and seeking of revenge. A shark seeking revenge? This is what I mean by when such a creature, an animal, becomes your adversary, they become more like a person. They are personified. We're going to take a look at something. I Am Legend, the top zombie, it's the same thing. It is the sentient zombie who becomes the adversary because he can think and plan and hate, and he's the only zombie who can do that. That kind of thing. Okay. Here are some examples. Some classic examples of adversaries. Oh, heavens, who will ever forget Jamie Gum? Is that how you pronounce his name? Down here on the right.
Oh, right.
The nightmares that character gave to lots and lots of people, and certainly lots and lots of kids. He played it, the actor who played it, it was written so strong and drippy with menace. And then it was played to the hilt by the actor. The poor actor, for a couple of years after this, he couldn't get any more work because everybody took a look at him and said, oh, that's Jamie Gum. He was so typecast. The poor guy, he was too good. Yeah? But eventually, now he works all the time. Yeah. He plays a lot of cop parts.
He was in Monk. He was Monk's.
Oh, yeah. Right.
He was great.
Yeah. Oh, he's a great actor. Yes.
He really is.
Okay. But this is clean and clear. I mean, this is the bad guy, the crazed killer. Okay. Sergeant Foley in An Officer and a Gentleman. That's up there. That was Lou Gossett Jr., and he got an Academy Award, I think, Best Actor, Best Supporting, Best Supporting Actor. He's the drill sergeant, and he's not a bad man. He's a very good man with a very difficult job. He is a drill sergeant whose job it is in these new candidates for flight school. These are all the people who want to become jet fighter pilots, right? And it's his job to weed out the ones who just might get themselves or somebody else killed. And the ones who aren't willing to defend and risk themselves to support and defend their fellow fighter pilots. And he puts a lot of pressure on them to see who cracks, and there are several who crack. And one of them who almost cracks, of course, is the hero, Richard Gere. So he's not a bad man, but oh, what a challenge and what an adversary he presents to be to the Richard Gere character. Miranda Priestley in The Devil Wears Prada, ooh, a woman who just relishes in crushing people for the pure power of it. It's marvelously written and marvelously played. Karen Crowder, that's the character's name from Michael Clayton. How many of you have seen Michael Clayton? That you got to put on the list. Michael Clayton, at the risk perhaps of getting too personal, but that's one of my favorite films, Michael Clayton. And that year, and it was only, 7, 8 years ago, I was beside myself, furious that it was overlooked for the Oscars, because there was so much going on there. It was a really terrific film. And her as the adversary, you just got to see this. You got to see this. She's an executive, a woman trying to climb her way up in the executive jungle. And her interpretation of how that is done is, you do anything necessary up to and including murder. It's not like she's comfortable with it, but she does it, and she is the adversary. It's great. It's a wonderful movie. Agent Parcher in A Beautiful Mind. This is The Beautiful Mind. I used to try to do that in this class, but it's too long and it's too complicated and goes, there's too many things to talk about, so it really doesn't work for our purposes. But A Beautiful Mind is the story of a man, John Nash, a genius, a physicist, and he goes insane. I forget the nature of the insanity, but he has hallucinations. He talks to people who aren't there. I mean, his whole career was destroyed by, what can you do? You go insane. They don't employ insane people as professors and scientists. But that could have been done, whereas, what does that mean? It means that John Nash is his own worst enemy. He is being destroyed from within. That means he's his own nemesis. However, it wasn't done that way when it was turned into a movie. The nemesis, the adversary, has to be one person, a real person. And so Agent Parcher came onto the scene and was invented. Agent Parcher is his strongest fantasy, although he doesn't know it's a fantasy for, 2/3 of Act 2. But it's his invention and projection of a person who has control of him. And that way, Agent Parcher is the personification, the one-person adversary that fills in for him being at war with himself. Because wars, battles where people are their own worst enemy, as a rule, they do not work. We can talk about that later if you like. I got another example there. But Agent Parcher and Amy Dunn in Gone Girl. Okay, there's some great examples. Now then, here's my first example for you for adversary. Here's the reason I picked this one. Sideways. How many of you have seen Sideways? Ooh, good. Most of you. And it's worth putting down on your lists. Sideways was an independent, small movie. outside of the Hollywood mainstream, truly. I checked, and I believe it was made for around $6 million total budget. Its total gross in its initial theatrical release was $100 million, and that's in its first theatrical release. Yes, that I would say, against the $6 million it cost to make, it did very well indeed. So, of course, I got it, broke it down, and it is the paradigm. It worked because it is the paradigm writ small as opposed to the big budget movies where it's writ large. But that is the way it is structured, beginning to end. And but one of the things that's unusual about it is that the adversary, most people say Jack is, his friend, his Lothario friend who keeps getting in more and more trouble every single day, that Miles, the hero, then has to get him out of, that he's the adversary. He is not. He is Jack in this, for those who have seen it and may see it soon. Jack is a comedic sidekick character. And the adversary is Miles' ex-wife, Victoria. He is obsessed with and crushed with depression over, they got divorced about a year ago. He lost his wife, Victoria. We find out eventually that it was his own fault, but it's not her fault. She didn't just dump him. He crossed the line, he had an affair, etc. Old story. But she is not physically present in most of the movie. She is present in two locations. This scene, which is very early in the second act, and then she shows up, and even that, she's not physically present. We only hear her voice on the telephone. And then she shows up in the obligatory scene. Remember, the adversary has to be one person or personification because of the obligatory scene. That's where they have to show up in the flesh so that the hero and the adversary can go for all the marbles. And that's where she shows up, which again is proof that she's the adversary. But it's done so uniquely and so simply. I really cherish this. Adversary is not physically present. The hero's ex-wife, Victoria. Okay? Let's see if I can lay this out for you quickly. I got to do this like that. Okay. The setup, there's a few of you who have not seen it, and the setup is that Miles has taken Jack, his good buddy, on a bachelor party trip through wine country. In 1 week, Jack will get married. And Miles is an onophile, and that's why he's taking him to wine country and showing him around. He's proud to show him how much he knows about wines. But unfortunately, Jack has always been a compulsive chaser of women. Any woman who's in the room, it's like, and it is, it's a compulsion. And he admits that later on. He says, "You don't know the nature of my problem." And it's true. It's for him a real problem. But that gets him into all kinds of trouble, which means it pulls Miles into all kinds of trouble. Okay. Jack recently told Miles, just a few hours before this scene, but Jack told Miles that his ex-wife Victoria just remarried. Miles didn't know that, obviously, because he wasn't invited to her wedding. And that, for Miles, in this little movie, that is stunning surprise one, because he freaks out. And he's very childish in his response, and he runs back to the car. He's just talking, he's waxing loquacious about the memories of when he came to this beautiful spot where he'd taken Jack under this tree, and we had a picnic here, and we drank wine and made love, and then Jack breaks it to him. He says, "Look, I was looking for an opportunity when we were alone to tell you this, but Victoria just remarried." And Miles comes unglued, grabs a bottle of wine, runs off into the vineyard as Jack is chasing after him, trying to stop him, and he's slugging back. This is the beginning of Act 2. Remember what we said about Act 2. Act 2 Well, Act 1 that fades into Act 2 is the adolescence, the character growth. In the character growth pattern, it's the adolescence of the hero. And at the beginning of Act 2, Miles is quite an adolescent and very childish in his moods and in his depression. And that it's laid out for us at the beginning of Act 2. This is the nature of what must change within him in the character growth arc, right? So, Jack has just set up this blind double date because he met Stephanie, the lady he's sitting beside there in that other picture. And he's coming on full bore for Stephanie. Unfortunately, he doesn't tell Stephanie that he's going to get married in about 5 days. Just a little oversight there. And of course, that weighs on Miles too, because Miles has a better moral compass than Jack does about these things. And it's troubling him, but he can't blow it up either. Jack has set up a blind double date with Stephanie, who got a friend of hers to come. So basically, Maya is Miles' date for the night, but he is ignoring her completely because he's getting drunk and he's being depressed. Miles is lost in the past, and this kept getting repeated. And even in Act 1, even his mother says it. He stops off for a scene with his mother. He's borrowing money or something like that. And the mother says, "Oh, you should go back with Victoria. You two are perfect for each other." She is echoing the truth of his suffering. He has always felt that they would get back together again, and that's his greatest wish. And I love double entendre titles, and that's part of the double entendre of the title of the movie, which is Sideways. Sideways, number one, of course, means drunk. It's another term for tipsy, because people move sideways rather than straight ahead. They lose balance. But sideways is also the way that Miles is living his life. He can't go ahead. He's stuck. He's focused completely on the past. He wants to step back into the past, get that relationship again, and he cannot think about moving forward. And that's why at the moment he is not communicating very well with the lovely lady Maya at all. Miles is lost in the past, longing to go home to Vicky. He can't even, and again, as a repetition, he can't even see this terrific woman, Maya, right beside him. Jack doesn't want a drunk Miles to ruin Jack's own chances of sleeping with Stephanie. Jack is, yes, a narcissist, and he's just worried about his own goals and concerns, but he's sweet and he's funny. And he has told Miles, do not drink and dial. He told him, just outside, he's been shaking him. You cannot drink and dial. I don't want you spoiling this date. So, of course, Miles drinks a lot of wine until he gets good and blasted, and he goes to dial, staggers on back to the payphone at the back of the restaurant. And the dialing, of course, is to Victoria. And so there is a scene here, early in the second act, where the power of the adversary is demonstrated. Just here, it's only on the telephone. She is not physically present, okay? Victoria answers the phone, and he's lighthearted, and he tries to be, upbeat about it. Oh, Jack just told me, and I called to say congratulations on your wedding, and it's all bullshit, of course. And it slips into Jack's being sarcastic and snide, and then pretty much crashing emotionally. Then he crumbles and says it again and out loud, I just always felt someday we'd get back together again. And that's become harder now since she's gotten remarried. And the adversary still dominates every corner of his life. She has the power here. You see how that is? She is more powerful than he. They divorced. She is moving on in life. He can't. He's stuck because of his immaturity. And she says, Miles, don't call me when you're drunk. Well, didn't help. And he kind of weaves on back to the table. Miles still is stuck drifting sideways, and more than anything, he still wants to go home to Victoria. And Jack is just ticked off at him because he's starting to spoil his odds with Stephanie. That's Jack's fist over the top of the wine bottle, cutting him off. Miles must learn what true adult unselfish love is. It's a really very nice, very, very well-drawn character growth arc. He does grow up by the end. Okay, so now we jump to Act 3. And the one other scene, the obligatory scene, in which the adversary appears. At great personal risk, Miles has gotten Jack home just in time to be married and the big wedding and stuff, right? And as you can see in the picture with the bandage, Jack has had his nose broken. For those of you who haven't seen it, the way he gets his nose broken is when Stephanie finally finds out that in 24 hours he's going to get married to somebody else. And she whacks him really hard and breaks his nose. Okay, but Miles is the hero. And Miles has grown in the second half of the second act because Jack gets himself into such deep trouble. And it's pretty outrageous, and it is a hilarious comedy, and it works. It all works. It's awfully well written. But he has made sacrifices and taken great personal risks to get Miles back and get him married. He has matured, and so he must face the obligatory scene. And here comes Victoria. Victoria comes up to him and introduces her new husband. And rather than the childish reaction that he got at the beginning of Act 2, he's hurt. Yes, he's wounded. He's just, awful things emotionally are going on inside of this guy. But the new husband, Ken, is respectful. He offers a handshake. He's glad to meet him and all that. And then Ken makes himself scarce. He says, I'll give you guys a minute and I'll go get the car, He's a class act, really, this guy. Miles discovers Ken is actually a decent guy. Miles is suffering, yes, but he deals with it by also offering respect in return. So they chat a little bit more. He's no longer behaving like a child, like he was several times earlier, and that's a good thing. And Miles says, well, let's go to the reception and toast to your wedding. Only this time, he almost means it. And Victoria says, she's not going to the reception. She's given up drinking. And that's kind of strange to Miles because they were wine drinkers and they shared that passion when they were together. And Ken comes up and she says, I need a minute more. And this all sets up for what's coming, those of you who have seen it. Then the final test. She's sweet about it. She is taking the time to make sure he knows in advance. This is an honorable thing for her to be doing. And the final test and the final blow. She says as gently as she can, I'm pregnant. For a guy like Miles, that is truly the hardest kick in the vitals he could possibly receive. And Victoria and Ken head off to their future lives together. And Miles now knows there's absolutely no road back. That's it. Her life is settled and set in another way, and he is not part of it. That's never going to happen. He must love her enough to finally let her go. And then there's this lovely little kind of quasi-denouement scene where that is his victory. At last, he closes the door on the past, and he throws himself a growing up party. He opens his best and most expensive, outrageously expensive bottle of wine, which he was always saving for a very, very special occasion. Well, now he opens it alone in a burger joint to toast to a solitary farewell toast to Victoria and the past, and to a hope for a new start in the future for himself. Okay, I got a bit far afield there because it's a small movie, and small movies are more about interpersonal things than the larger movies. And in order to understand the adversary and the power she has over this hero, you need to know some of this stuff. But this is for this story and this hero, this is an extraordinarily successful adversary character. She's in 2 scenes in the whole movie. That's another way of doing it. Okay, and these are the requirements. Primary opposition for the hero, yes. Appears unbeatable. For a long, long time, she sure appears unbeatable, and she's going to take him down a very bad emotional trail. Can wear the mask of friendship, not relevant. Not always a bad person, she's not. She's a true sweetheart. Must be a person, and so she is. So you can see some of these are fulfilled in this particular adversary, and some of them are not.